She was suspended in 48 hours flat. And the video that did it wasn't even the worst part. A WNBA co-owner just got banned from her own team's arena, not for losing her temper at a referee, not for a bad trade, for screaming at two teenage girls holding a thank you sign. And by the time you finish this video, you'll understand why the league moved faster on this than they've moved on almost anything else this season, and why the story everyone thinks they know is only half of it. Stick around, because there's a detail near the end of this story involving a shirt, a locker room, and a double standard that nobody in the WNBA office wants to talk about on the record. Before we get into it, if you're new here, hit subscribe. This channel covers the stories the mainstream sports desks are too nervous to touch, and this one is about to blow up even further. Let's start with the basics, because you need the full timeline to understand how fast this spiraled. It begins about a week before any of the arena drama. Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham sat down for an interview and was asked directly about transgender athletes in women's sports. She didn't dodge it. She said she wanted to protect young girls in sports and in locker rooms, and that she didn't think they should have to compete against biological men. That was it. One direct answer to a direct question. It went national almost instantly. By the following Tuesday, the Fever were in Seattle to play the Storm. And outside Climate Pledge Arena, before the ball was even in the air, a small crowd had gathered, some in support of Cunningham's comments, some tied to a broader debate happening across Washington state about girls' sports eligibility. Now here's where it gets personal. Inside the arena, two 16-year-old girls were sitting courtside. They weren't shouting. They weren't confronting anyone. They were holding a sign that read, "Thank you, Sophie, for speaking up for girls." Simple. No insults. Just a thank you to a player they admired. And according to what those girls told the podcast, undividedpod.com afterward, a Storm co-owner approached them mid-game. And it did not stay calm. They said she directed profanity at them, allegedly calling them insane, and that the confrontation escalated to the point where one of the girls said she'd never been yelled at like that in her life. Now pause here, because this is the moment worth sitting with. Whatever your opinion on the underlying debate, biological sex, trans inclusion, any of it, this was two teenagers at a basketball game holding a sign, and an adult with an ownership stake in the team allegedly lost it on them in front of thousands of people. Who was that co-owner? Her name is Celeste Keaton, a minority owner of the Seattle Storm. The Storm organization didn't name her right away. Their first statement, issued the next day, was vague, acknowledging that one of our co-owners had an exchange with two fans, without naming her, without detailing what was actually said. Just a general line about wanting Storm games to feel welcoming for everyone. That's it. That's the whole statement. No name, no specifics, no immediate apology to the girls directly. So how did the world find out who it actually was and what actually happened? It wasn't the league. It wasn't the team. It was the girls themselves telling their story publicly, and it spread from there. And that's when things moved fast. By Thursday, 2 days after the incident, the WNBA confirmed that Celeste Keaton had been fined an undisclosed amount and suspended from attending the Storm's next 5 home games. The league didn't publicly spell out the exact reason in their statement, but multiple outlets confirmed it was tied directly to her confrontation with the two fans. 5 games. A fine. For a co-owner. That's not a slap on the wrist you hand out lightly, which tells you something about how seriously this was taken once it became public. Now here's where the story could have ended, but it didn't, because of how the player at the center of all this chose to respond. Sophie Cunningham didn't come out swinging. She didn't demand anyone get fired. Here's what she actually posted, in her own words, on X. She called it truly embarrassing of the co-owner, adding that it unfortunately shows the type of leader she is. But then she went further than criticism. She wrote that she believes there's a safe space and love for everybody, biological girls, biological boys, trans women, and trans men, and that everyone is welcome at her table. She said you can disagree and still be kind. And she gave a shout out to the two girls directly, telling them bravo for standing up for what they believe and promising them gifts. Think about that combination for a second. A player who has taken real heat for her stance on this issue, choosing, in the same breath, to defend two crying teenagers, criticize an owner's behavior, and extend an open hand to people on the other side of the debate. That's not the reaction people expected. And it's a big part of why this story kept growing instead of fading. Now stay with me, because there's a wrinkle in this story that most coverage glossed over, and it's the part that actually explains why this got so heated in the arena that night. The two girls weren't just holding a sign. According to Fox 13 Seattle, they were also wearing shirts from a brand called XXXY Athletics, a brand whose name references the chromosome pairs tied to biological sex, and which is explicitly built around opposing transgender inclusion in women's sports. So this wasn't just two fans quietly cheering for a player they liked. They walked into that arena, making a statement themselves. Does that justify what Keaton is accused of doing? No. Nothing justifies an adult with power over the team allegedly screaming profanity at two 16-year-olds, but it's a piece of context that got buried in a lot of the outrage coverage, and if you're going to understand this story fully, you need it. Here's another detail that deserves more attention than it got. The confrontation itself wasn't caught on video. Keaton's actual words weren't recorded. What we have is the girl's account, given publicly on a podcast, and a separate video from elsewhere in the arena showing other fans heckling the two girls, with someone audibly yelling for them to be removed, telling them to take the trash out. So there were two layers of hostility that night, one from an owner allegedly, one from fans around them. And the arena as a whole wasn't exactly a picture of calm. Now let's talk about what the teams around this actually did or didn't do, because this is where the bigger picture starts to form. The Fever, Cunningham's own team, were asked directly by reporters after the game about the rally outside the arena and about the broader reaction to her comments. Their head coach read a prepared organizational statement saying that neither the team nor Cunningham had any knowledge of the demonstration outside and no contact with whoever organized it. The stated message: their only goal was to win basketball games. Full stop. No further engagement with the controversy. You can read that as smart, disciplined message control. Or you can read it as an organization stepping back and leaving its own player to handle a firestorm largely on her own. Both readings have some truth to them. Meanwhile, the Storm's own statement, even after confirming they respected the league's decision to suspend and fine Keaton, stuck to broad, safe language. Something about remaining committed to a welcoming and respectful environment for anyone who attends a game. No detail. No real accountability language pointed at what specifically happened. So here's the pattern, and it's worth naming directly. An incident happens in front of thousands of people. The organization involved keeps its statement vague and doesn't name the person responsible. The full story only becomes public because the people who were harmed, two teenagers, chose to speak up. And only after that pressure builds does the league confirm real discipline. That's not a story about one bad night at one basketball game. That's a story about how these situations tend to get handled quietly until the internet won't let them stay quiet. Now keep this in mind, because it connects to something coming up in a minute that changes how you might read the league's overall posture here. The financial reaction tells its own story too. In the days following the incident, Cunningham's merchandise sales spiked noticeably. Her jersey became one of the top sellers in the league. Whatever side of this debate people are on, a huge number of fans clearly decided they wanted to publicly back her, and Cunningham's response kept threading a difficult needle the entire time, holding her position from that original ESPN interview without backing down, while also refusing to demonize the people who disagreed with her. That's a harder balance to strike than it sounds, especially with your name trending nationally for reasons you didn't ask for. So where does that leave things? Celeste Keaton is sitting out 5 home games and paying a fine the WNBA hasn't disclosed the amount of. The Storm organization is on record saying they respect that decision without ever fully detailing what she's accused of saying. Sophie Cunningham has become, somewhat unintentionally, the calm center of a national conversation that has nothing to do with her jump shot. And 2 16-year-old girls who went to a basketball game with a thank you sign, ended up at the center of a league-wide disciplinary decision. Now here's the suspense I promised you at the start, the part almost nobody is talking about yet. The WNBA has never instituted a formal league-wide policy on transgender athletes. Not before this incident, not after it. The suspension of Celeste Keaton was about her conduct toward fans, not a ruling on the underlying issue itself, which means the exact debate that sparked this entire chain of events is still completely unresolved at the league level. No policy, no clear stance. Just one very public, very costly consequence for how one person handled the tension in the room, which raises the real question hanging over the rest of this season. If the league won't take a position on the issue itself, how many more Celeste Keaton moments are waiting to happen at the next game and the one after that? That's the part worth watching for. Not because I'm telling you what to think about the underlying debate, but because until the league actually addresses it directly instead of just disciplining the fallout, this is not the last time you're going to see a story exactly like this one. If you want to be here when the next one breaks, subscribe now, because these situations tend to move fast, and I cover them the moment they happen, not days later once everyone else has already picked the story apart.